Accessing library computer data.
Out there are no saints. Just people.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Continuing our run through Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Right now we're up to the episode called The Begotten. It is the 12th episode of the 5th season, aired on January 27th, 1997. It was written by Renee Echevarria, directed by Jesus Salvador Trevino. In this episode, Odo receives a sick infant changeling from Quark and tries to teach it to shapeshift without resorting to the invasive techniques used by his old mentor, Dr. Mora. Meanwhile, Major Kira gives birth to the O'Brien's baby. Clay, it's the moment we've all been waiting for. The birth of the O'Brien's baby. How are you?
Cats in the cradle and a silver spoon. A changeling boy in a bottle of goo.
I hope you... Hopefully that didn't take too much of your post-episode thought process here, because I think this episode we actually have a lot to talk about. I find this episode very fascinating. I find it to be interesting and all of that stuff.
I was working on all the verses of that song through most of the episode, so I didn't pay very close attention.
Did you see the first episode with Dr. Mora? Have you seen this character before?
I don't remember. He seemed... I don't remember the character, but he seemed familiar in the way that all, middle-aged guest stars on Star Trek shows seem familiar.
Yes, it's James Sloyan, who I think that's how you pronounce his name. He was on TNG in a couple roles. He's been on this before, and I think he's been on things like the X-Files.
Yeah, if you had told me that guy played like 4 other characters on the show, I'd be like, oh yeah, that guy.
Right.
So,
yeah.
He's one
So
of those guys.
you might not have seen Dr. Moore, but I think the episode did a good job of getting around to that anyway. So we're going to take a break. We're going to play an audio clip. Me and Clay are going to come back, and we're going to break down The Begotten.
I realize you can't understand a word I'm saying, but that doesn't matter. I know you're aware of me. You see, I was once like you. Huh? I spent months in a lab being prodded and poked by a scientist who didn't recognize I was a life form. He thought I was a specimen. A mystery that needed to be unraveled. He never talked to me. It didn't occur to him. I didn't know what I was or what I was supposed to do. I was lost, alone.
You know, I like the title, but begotten kind of sounds like a word that it feels like your mouth is a motor that can't quite start. It's like turning over and you're just like begotten. But this one's called The Begotten. It is a Odo-centric episode written by Renee Echevarria, who at this point is probably turning out to be the show's finest character writer. He's done things like Explorers, Facets, Rejoined, Crossfire, which we loved, and Nor the Battle to the Strong are his script credits.
I don't think I realized that he had written other episodes before this.
Oh, really?
I'm sure every episode we've covered that he's written, I've said, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know he wrote episodes, so I'd like to continue that trend.
Oh, this is not saying, Renee Auberjonois, if that's what you're thinking.
Oh, I'm an idiot.
This is a different Renee. Yeah, this is the writer Renee, not actor.
Too many Renees with exotic last names on this show.
Clay Makes America Great Again in 2019. We're going to talk about The Begotten. So we'll just start with you. What'd you think of this one?
I don't know if you knew this, but I have built a wall between my eyes and my television just for this purpose. Peering
over it from your guard tower on the other side?
Yes. No, I thought this one was I'm such a moron. That explains why I was like, man, I can't believe they let Odo write this episode. This is a pretty big deal. Anyway, I thought it was really good. I didn't care much for the Kira stuff. Again, they gave her a new haircut because you can't have the same haircut twice in the season, apparently.
Yes.
I didn't think the Kira stuff was that interesting. It seemed very sitcom-y to me. But I thought the Odo stuff was fantastic. I like that stuff a lot. I think the two things together worked pretty well. Because, you had the birth of the baby and then the baby, dying, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So I liked the contrast, the juxtaposition there was nice. I really liked that scene at the end with Odo and Kira. The only thing I wish they had done differently is I wish they had leaned into the thing dying a little bit more and given Odo more of a dramatic scene. Because like when he's holding it in his hands and he starts saying stuff like, "Oh, I was really looking forward to teaching you how to change into a made up bird."
Yep.
I was like, "Oh God, I don't know if I'm going to be able to deal with this. This is going to be really fucking sad." And then they just kind of like clip it there, and then it kind of goes away.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wish they had given him more to work with. Just give him a little bit more time to have him have like a really emotional scene, because it's a big deal.
Yes. Yep. I have a lot of thoughts about the that Odo scene. I'll probably start off somewhere else. I think that'll start on with the this is, well, just on like a personal level, I think that this episode means a lot more to me now than it did when I originally watched it. It's a lot about parent and child relationship type stuff. It is probably Star Trek at its best in terms of being like a sci-fi concept that you mix with a real world symbolism. And in this case, it's not even really a lot of symbolism. It's just kind of using an alien point of view or an alien plot line to flesh out your parental sort of point that you're trying to make. And I think that I agree with you about the O'Briens, although I do think that this is maybe the best O'Brien stuff that they've done together. Like it's funny because it's overly broad and very sitcom-y and sort of unrealistic. But at the same time, I thought that the relationship that they all had with each other in that was pretty realistic. And I wonder if I'll throw... I'm going to start this off a little bit differently, and I think that we'll move into it. So what I don't like, or what I find fascinating about this episode, is that this episode highlights two plot lines that I think the show did not do a very good job of doing. And they both have kind of ended. That's Odo's changing into a solid, and then Kira's pregnancy. They've resolved both of them at this point. So I wanted to, I guess we'll start off. What did you think? You had mentioned before you kind of liked Odo's solid storyline, which has been going for like 13 episodes at this point. What do you think about it now as you look back? Because he has regained his ability to shapeshift at this point going forward. So what do you think of it? And did you have any like sort of regrets or think that they came up short, or if you think they excelled or whatever?
Yeah, I wish they hadn't turned him back so soon. Did that happen this season, or was that last season where he got turned solid?
It was the season finale of the previous season. Okay.
Yeah, I wish they had done more with it. I don't really think that they gave it enough time to really explore. I guess it's tough because then, how many things, how much is there really to explore with that concept? But I feel like they should have done more with it. Like I feel like he's a big enough character where even if you did a little bit every episode, it would have felt a lot more utilized. But they didn't. They did it every now and then, but it was not something that became as much of a focal point of the character as I hoped it would.
Yeah, they used it for things. I can remember just a couple scenes where there's the O'Brien episode where Keiko gets possessed and O'Brien punches Odo. That's one of it. And then when he breaks his leg in the Ascent, which you watched with Darren. Those are like the two major things that I can think of it actually having an impact on him, and both of them are fairly minor. The Ascent is a little bit more important that he gets injured in it, but the punch from O'Brien is pretty meaningless. Yeah.
And I will say, though, I very much identified with Odo at the beginning of this episode where he's like, my back hurts. I must have some weird alien cancer.
Yes,
I was like, yeah, that's every day of my life, man. I'm right there with you. The Kira stuff, I don't know.
Well, let me say something about the Odo thing first. To me, the problem with the Odo thing is that I think it sounds better on paper than what it actually ends up being, because to me, Odo's ability to shapeshift is not his most interesting quality. It's kind of a power that he has, but really the reason that he's interesting as a character is because he is the ex-Nazi prison guard who's living amongst a utopian peace society now, and he still has his sort of authoritarian views on everything. So removing Odo's ability to shapeshift does not fundamentally change the character at all, because he's still the same person. He just can't have his little power at this point. And because we're humans and we can't actually shapeshift, it becomes very similar to that episode of TNG where Troy lost her powers and started screaming about it. And you're watching it as an audience member going like, well, I don't relate to your superpowers, so this doesn't really mean anything to me. And I think that the Odo storyline was just a miscalculation about, I think they did it as a good idea. I thought that they'd get something out of it. I realized you can't really get much out of it. And then did something like this occasionally, this episode, where he says, because Odo's relationship to his baby in this one doesn't really change because he's a solid. You know what I mean? Like he would have that relationship even if he had his shape-shifting abilities. So taking his shape-shifting away ended up with a lot of stories where it doesn't really change Odo. He doesn't really feel any different. He doesn't react to things any different. So I think that was just a mistake from the get-go. It's not a good Odo storyline, I don't think.
Well, I think the thing that they kind of dropped the ball on too is that you know, as we've discussed previously, Odo's whole thing is regimented order, right? And ironically, him being able to turn into him being a changeling and being of more malleable form allows him complete control over whatever state he is in.
Yeah.
And the irony being that him being turned human takes away that control and locks him into a body that he does not know how to deal with, that is constantly out of control. And they touch on that stuff, but usually only in like comedic ways, like at the beginning of this episode. But you have to think, man, that would be like some fucked up body horror from his angle.
Yes.
Like if he's all about, you know, control and order, and then he's locked into this form where he doesn't know how anything works. He's aware of the concept, but he doesn't know what it feels like to be hungry. He doesn't know what it feels like to, you know, have to go to the bathroom or, you know, have a joint pain or something. That would be like fucking drive him nuts. And I think having the opportunity to take this regimented character and put him into an ironically out of order, uncontrollable situation inside of his own body is something that I wish they had gotten into a little bit more in a more serious or at least I guess serious is a good way to put it, a serious way.
Yeah, more focused. I think that the problem there comes down to, it goes along with Odo's powers, which is that the show doesn't have the budget to really support how much shape-shifting you think he would do as a conception of a character. You know, like if you had this character, he should be shape-shifting all the time. That's kind of his thing, and there's a lot of advantages to doing it. But because it's a 90s television sci-fi series, he is basically humanoid for 99.9% of the time. So you never really get to appreciate how much of a limitation this is for him, because the show previously had never shown him to be much of a shapeshifter. You know, like it's not really removing much. Troy's removal of a power is actually much more important because that character would actually do it every single episode, and Odo is not that way.
I think Troy could still bullshit her way through it, just being like, I don't have my powers, but you seem kind of agitated. According to the
script, this character's little Chiron says agitated. He's angry.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I think, excuse me, I think they got around having to make him shapeshift all the time by making him the kind of character that he is, in that he kind of sticks to the human form more often than not and doesn't really flaunt it because he wants to fit in.
Right.
So they built that into his character, which is kind of genius if you think about it. Like, we have this character who can shape change, but we can't afford to do it a lot, so let's make his character not want to shape change.
Right. He's the outsider who wants to fit in, and there's no better way than not doing what makes him special.
But even though we don't see him do it a lot, I think this storyline could have benefited a lot from just small moments of him forgetting he can't.
Yeah.
Or just straight up not being able to. Like, you know, going to like, if you were able to walk through walls, even if you didn't do that power very often on the show, you're going to have some scenes where you go to walk through a wall and you hit the wall, that kind of thing. Yep. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whatever the Odo version of that would be. Like he tries to sleep in his bucket, but he can't get in the bucket because he's a human. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the O'Brien thing kind of fits into that.
Bigger bucket.
Like forgetting that he can be punched is kind of along those lines, and it sneaks up on him a little bit. He doesn't draw attention to it, but I could see that being the point of that.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. Do you? Because I feel like all the things that we're saying feel like they could fill an episode.
And then get
I don't
old?
know. Yeah, I don't know if it would get old or maybe a few episodes. I don't know. I guess it would depend on how you handle it and how it changes him going forward. And it hasn't changed him that much.
No,
as much as I expected it to.
Yeah, I think that's I understand what you're talking about him being such a regimented person, and then ironically not being able to become an unregimented organism would lead to him being a little bit confused and sort of out of place and everything. I still don't think he learned, like, all that really ends up amounting to is a lot of sort of physical gags, like you're saying, like he's forgot. It doesn't really get to the point of what makes Odo different from everybody else. And I don't think there's a way around it. Like what's interesting, the shapeshifters and the changelings changing their shape makes them thematically interesting as a villain, because they can kind of infiltrate things, and that they are, your worst fears are things that you can't really see, and the way that they play off of society's weaknesses and society's fears as a weaponized version of their sort of warfare. Odo's sense of being doesn't really tie into, like, the shape-shifting doesn't really tie into that. It's useful, but it's not really what makes them interesting as an enemy and as a people. So I think they were just kind of up against a rock and a hard place. Like I would have said that maybe you could have changed him back even sooner, because they didn't get much out of it and they could have abandoned it a little bit. At that point I would have been like, well, what was the point of doing it at all, I suppose. But I think I'm glad that they cut the cord with the idea here. I
think the thing that's missing is that the changing him into solid itself is not the biggest change for the character, as much as removing him from the great land party in the sky of the changeling race.
Yep. He's got the little yellow triangle on his icon. There's no connection to the internet at this point. Yeah.
And even that they didn't really lean into as much as I thought they were going to.
Well, he doesn't talk to the changelings enough. He doesn't have enough of a contact with them for that to really mean something. And they bring it up here because he cannot link with the baby changeling.
Right.
Which is important, but it doesn't feel, that's not important enough to this episode to really amount to anything. It's just kind of like, oh, this would be a lot easier if you had your powers, but let's try to do another way anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess it's more or less, it's just kind of a wasted story, unfortunately.
It's one of those, it just sounds like a good idea at first. It's like, oh, that'd be kind of neat if Odo lost his ability to shapeshift. Let's see what that does. And then you think about it, you're like, well, maybe not. So we'll have to see. The other thing,
I think they should have really gone for it and changed things up and had him locked into the shape of like a dog. And so then you have
the dog at the ops meetings. Just
you have a dog at the ops meetings, a dog, and you've got some, that thing where they give them peanut butter to eat so their mouth moves while somebody talks off screen. That would have been great. It would have changed the whole. It would have been the most popular Star Trek show of all time if they had done that.
Someone's got to reshoot this thing as a fan service episode, where every episode is, as Odo during his solid phase, is a dog. a little like I would go with German Shepherd, I guess. That seems to fit his
I was
personality.
thinking German Shepherd too, actually. Yeah.
I was thinking the Fraser dog at first, but I think he needs to be bigger and more intimidating.
Yeah, something that that his costume would look good on when the dog is sitting.
I like this touch of this episode at the end. His costume falls off when he shapeshifts into the bird. He's been wearing real clothes the entire time. Yeah.
Yeah, I was glad to see that too. A lot of times they forget those little details.
Yeah.
Like, if you ever watched the Superman movie, the Christopher Reeve Superman movie, there's a scene where he's standing on the side of a building as this robber. This has always bothered me. This robber climbing, suction cupping his way up the windows of a building, and Superman's just standing there.
Yeah.
And he's standing with his back to the ground. He's like at a right angle, standing on the wall with his back to the ground, and his cape is hanging horizontally towards the building.
Yeah, right.
Because obviously they shot it
him standing up.
Turn the camera sideways. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know. Movie making guys.
It's one of those things. The editor is just sitting there looking through all the clips, going, "Oh my god, are you kidding me?"
We just turned into the most obnoxious podcast on the planet.
Well, we can move
Let me point out the other things wrong with this 40-year-old Superman movie.
Did you know,
and why it's all bullshit?
Did you know, Clay, that Vader's chest plate is backwards in one of the shots of A New Hope? Well,
Jeez, what a piece of garbage that movie is, too. Let's just take all the things we like and tear them to pieces. That's what everybody does these days.
All right, so let's do it with the Kira storyline. So that was my problem with the Odo storyline.
Nice segue.
My problem with the Kira storyline here is that I like the Shakar and O'Brien stuff so much in this episode. I wish they had focused on this more. This one continues. This one feels similar to the Odo problem to me, in that it came up as a solution to the real-world pregnancy of Nana Visitor, and they wrote it, but they did not want to really do anything with it. And I think that there was so much material that they could have done with. They opened and closed the storyline with a sort of weirdness on what being a mother means to both of them, but they ignored it the entire stretch of the way. Both Keiko and Kira ignore it. And here, it ends in this really heartbreaking scene of Kira just saying, like, all I want to do is hold the baby. And I feel they could have gotten so much out of that. And there's so much with the Shakar and O'Brien, sort of a jealousy on Shakar's part, and O'Brien being like, listen, it's my baby. Like, will you get the fuck out of here? Like, what are you doing? And I just feel there was a lot of really interesting stuff there. And like the Odo thing, it was played mostly for comedy, and it feels like it was killing time until they could get to another storyline that they'd prefer to do.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I I don't know. I just don't like Shakar in general.
This is his last appearance. He's never coming back.
Oh, thank God.
Yep.
Does he die off screen?
No, they just kind of fade away. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's fine. She can do so much better.
She likes her bland men.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I never really liked Shakar. I think they used him pretty well here. Yeah, I wish there was another thing where I guess I would have liked it more if they had a little bit more room to breathe with some of this stuff and some of the actual conflicts that are going on, instead of just getting that little bit. Like, because you don't get any of this. I mean, I understand that it's not something she considers until after she has the baby, but she doesn't really have much of a point of view on it as she's giving birth. She's just sort of there to be the rope to be fought over by the two dogs.
Yes, yeah. As they do the bad comedy of pulling on each arm as they try to get out.
Yeah.
Cole Meany, I don't dislike Cole Meany as an actor. He's not good at that kind of comedy. If you've seen The Commitments, he's much better in like grounded, realistic comedy. And he's not really good at these sort of over-the-top, broad, playful comedy stuff here. It comes across really, really badly. I think he suffered through most of these scenes, and it's not really his fault.
I thought he was good at playing that gong poorly.
He is. He's good at that kind of stuff. That's more his comedy style than the other thing. But I like the gong. I like the O'Brien reactions in this. It felt true. I will say, and I'll throw it to you, this episode and the Kira pregnancy storyline both go an enormous way of showing how this is an all-male writing staff. I think the way that they portray the labor and the pregnancy here is borderline offensive to women. Having seen what my wife went through with the two kids, and I was watching this again this morning as a rewatch, just kind of on in the background, and Amy came in and watched it, and she could not get over the fact that the labor was portrayed as a painless, this just kind of happens thing. Mm-hmm. She was really like sort of like angry about it, and I think that it's even true. It's just the fact that they ignored that Kira should feel something about the baby as she's raising the baby inside of her goes to show that there's no female perspective on the show. And it's a really glaring thing of where diversity of experience and opinion would be helpful, because it really feels like they completely whiffed on this, because it's the way that pregnancy was handled is completely unrealistic. And I think that it's sort of unforgivable. It's really not interesting the way that they did it. It's very bland, and it's very not aware of what women go through when they're carrying the babies and how they feel about all that stuff, and they just ignored all of it.
Hey man, maybe Bajoran pregnancies are more or less painless. I don't know.
I think they say that in the episode, which is I don't. Well, I don't know.
Isn't it the whole point of what's going on is that the Bajoran pregnancy can only happen if she's like totally relaxed or something.
Yeah, so if they're fighting in the background, it causes her to stop having labor. She just turns it off.
Is it possible that they were doing that intentionally as kind of like a sort of like a joke?
They could be, but is it funny? It's more. I don't know. I just think it's odd. I just thought it was a very odd thing, and I think people will say that birthing scenes are kind of cliche and stuff, but I don't know. I think it's it's kind of like, it would be kind of like having a medical show and you performed like a leg amputation with no anesthesia, and the guy was just like, "Hey, what's going on down there?" You know, like it's disconnected from what it's actually like, I think.
Yeah, like. They're cutting his leg off, and he's like, "Hey, are you working hard or hardly working?"
You got to use that tourniquet. Yeah.
You know what would have been nice is if the argument or the lack of relaxation had been more due to her than it was to them. So, like, they're kind of bickering, Shakara and O'Brien are kind of bickering or whatever, but then they kind of calm it down, and she's still not totally relaxed, and then it's one of those things where she realizes it's not that everybody around her is being stressed out and she's totally cool about it. It's like she actually gets to express some emotion and some feeling about it and realize that she's the one who's currently, freaked out and not relaxed.
Stressed about having to give the baby away would be the way that you tie that in. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you don't voice that part of it, because I still really like that ending scene, because it is pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I think you can have her voice other frustrations with the whole If they had given her a scene where she just like lets loose all of her frustrations about the whole process of being pregnant and everything she's been put through and blah 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 blah, just like really laying into everybody, and that's sort of like the purging of the toxic whatever, and allows her to be ready to have this baby.
Yes,
I think that probably would have made up a little bit for the lack of really touching in with her along the way.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'd agree with that. I think that's correct. And I'd maybe even be more forgiving of that whole arc about her not really feeling anything throughout the entire pregnancy if they had focused on it a little bit more in this episode. But
especially since I mean, they essentially turned the episode, the story about her giving birth, into a story about Shakara and O'Brien.
Yes,
which is not great.
Yeah, not a good look.
Also, I guess that points to the fact that there's no women on the writing team.
Yes.
So I think it would have been nice if it had been. I think you could do that stuff in the background and have it still be fine. It would have been more interesting I think it would have been more appropriate, not just interesting, for it to be more about Kira specifically, or if you really had to, Kira and Keiko.
Yes, it's about Kira and Keiko. Yeah, and neither of them get the appropriate. O'Brien gets the focus because he's a cast member.
Keiko's barely in this episode.
Yeah, she is.
She has like 2 scenes, and all she does is go like, "Miles, learn how to keep time better,"
and then kicks him out at the end. Says, "Miles, she's not joking." Yeah.
Yeah, it's now that I think about it, it's really weird that the story about Kira giving birth is about Shakar and O'Brien.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have not seen Shakar to this point. You know what I mean? Like, I feel
he's always late.
He's always late to things. What I do like about the O'Brien and Shakar thing is that O'Brien is basically talking to like the ruler of this planet, and he's very dismissive of him, which I think is pretty funny. Yeah,
I mean, that's how if you meet these people in the right situation, they're just people.
They are. That's right. That's exactly what I said to
I almost hit Ray Bork in the head with a hockey stick outside of a hockey arena, and he was totally cool about it.
That pretty much sums up my feelings about those two. So I think that the episode is interesting because it wraps up 2 failed, I would consider them both to be failed storylines at that point. They did not really accomplish what I would have set out to do. But the main focus of the episode, as always, is the Odo and Mora storyline. So what you said you liked the Odo and Mora stuff. I really like it. I think it's great. I think that Renee Auberjonois is excellent. I think that Renee Echeverria, the writer of the episode, is perfect at writing these character episodes for these guys at this point. All of his character-based episodes are really, really strong.
Maybe I'm not wrong. Have we ever seen them in the same room together?
I don't know. And it's, Spanish and Spain and France are right next to each other. So
that's true.
It's very,
that's what I've always said.
Echeverria is probably Mexican or something. And I'm just being horribly, horribly ignorant, but
hey, we're all one people.
The Odo storyline.
Why my wall is inside my house.
The Odo storyline, I really like. I think it's really, really touching. I think it's great. I think that the way that they play off Mora and Odo and the changeling baby in Odo is really fantastic. I have one huge problem with it, but let's get to what you really liked about it. And if you, I don't know if you really, I strongly relate to the point of Odo is going in trying to be the sort of modern progressive parent who's not going to yell at his kid and not going to make him do anything and not going to be what his father was to him. And Mora is more the conservative, if you spare the rod, you spoil the child, even says that in this episode. As I'm getting older, I agree more with Mora on a personal level. I think that Mora's point of view makes more sense. And I think that Odo actually comes to understand that, I think, and which is interesting to me, that the thing is really about Odo coming to terms with the way that he was raised. And I think it's correct. And I think I might have disagreed if I was younger, thinking that Odo's way of proceeding with the baby was more correct. But as I get older, and now that I have the two kids, Moro seems like he's talking sense the entire time.
Yeah. I think what's nice is that they do kind of come to a meeting of the minds where it's like, well, yes, Odo was not correct.
Yes.
But Mora was also not correct.
Right, he was
it
too
was a little
extreme.
bit of both.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, a little bit of both that when you put it together ends up killing the child. But when they come together, they both come to terms with how the other one's approach is beneficial, which is really nice. Not having a child myself, and I apologize, I don't mean to belittle anybody as a father or either a parent or anything. The closest I can come to relating to this story is when we got my dog, which is just like having a child. We were training the dog and everything. We got super lucky that he's already housebroken and didn't really need a lot of work, because we did the same thing that Odo does, where it's like, well, we want to be appropriate, but also like not
cruel.
Yeah. So we tried a few things and took him to these different places. And then at a certain point, he did something fairly recently that that was like, a bad thing for the dog to do. And I realized I don't know how to discipline this dog.
Yeah.
Like I know how to do like the friendly control stuff, but if he doesn't want to listen to me, he's not going to fucking listen to me, and I don't know what to do. Like I'm not going to hit him, but I don't have anything like in place that is like a strict rule that pushes away this behavior in him. And I was kind of like, okay. Yeah, maybe listening to all of the new age advice about X, Y, and Z is not always the best way to go. Maybe it is a mix of things that is probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, it's a special thing when the kids reach an age. It happens fairly early where they realize that they don't realize that you can't hit them, but they realize that there's no when
Alistair just stands in front of you, slapping you in the face, calling you a pussy.
There is a certain point where negotiations break down.
Dad. Come on, do it.
And you can't make him do something. And it's like, well, if this was 50 years ago, I would just smack you and you'd probably get around to doing it. But now certainly can't. And I think that I understand Odo's weakness here, where he can't electrocute his child into doing what he wants it to do. Leads to a little bit of tension between the two of them.
Yeah, you and me are basically on the same page, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, I think that I think that the storyline works mostly because it is sort of a merging of those two extremes with each other, which is that you do need a little bit of discipline. You do need to push kids. You do need to sort of push. If you don't push people, and especially kids, they will not do things for you. Like, and kids are super capable of what. Kids are more capable of doing things than the general public seems to believe, is my opinion about that. But
can I ask you a question as a parent?
Sure.
Do you and Amy have like after the kids go to sleep, do you have a debriefing session where you just laugh for an hour at all the stuff that you couldn't laugh at when they did it? Otherwise, they would get one over on you. Because I've noticed that with small kids, the few interactions I've had with like 2-year-olds, they get to a certain point where they do something, and if you laugh at them, they're like, I got you.
Yes.
And so you, even if it, you got to keep it pressed down is what it seems like. So I always assume that parents have like a moment at night where they just like burst out laughing for an hour talking about the ridiculous shit that their kids did.
You do a little recap session after they go to bed, which is maybe not specifically about that, but kind of laughing at all the things that they did. But there are things where we're eating dinner and you're trying desperately to get this kid to eat his chicken nuggets and he's not doing it. And he'll say something really funny and one of you will have to leave the table and go laugh in the kitchen or something. That does happen quite a bit, because if they see you laugh, they know that they've won. They do realize that immediately. Yeah. Yep. It's brutal. And unfortunately, so we'll get back to this because I do want to wrap up with the weakness of this storyline to me. The storyline here where they use the baby changeling to give Odo his powers back is a colossal mistake, I think. It's a colossal mistake on par with the writers not understanding what the Kira motherhood is going through and what that character should be going through. No parent views the death of a child as any kind of gift. Even if
I mean, you have to consume the child.
Even if that gift is a Star Trek sci-fi thing, the death of the baby changeling, I don't think is treated appropriately here at the end. I think that they're too light with it, and Odo using the death of the changeling as a way to get his powers back feels really tone deaf in a lot of ways.
Would you have preferred it if he actively did that? So basically like, so the thing is dying, the baby's dying, and he or someone else realizes or comes up with some technobabble thing where it's like, it's weak enough where, you have the same genetic makeup as this thing. If we graft it onto you using some bullshit science thing, then you can actually save its life somehow. That kind of thing where he's actually like...
You mean it becomes a part of him and lives on?
Yeah, instead of him just like forgetting to wipe it up with a paper towel and now he's got superpowers. I
don't like him absorbing it. I don't think.
Yeah, it is kind of weird. It was definitely weird.
It implies to me that it kind of lives on in him. And I mean, maybe that's it lives on as the memory of his deceased child, I suppose you could argue. I don't think that was the right decision. It just feels to me like it means that the baby doesn't really die is how it comes across. And I think that merging it with him would be another mistake. I feel the storyline has to be that the baby dies at the end of this. And I understand that the gift is what they think is important. It allows it to continue, but Odo getting his powers back has been such as we talked about at the start, it's such an underwhelming thing that the death of the changeling feels like it's just being used and not being respected enough in terms of what the Odo story is for this entire thing. Yeah.
And also, it opens up a really dark possibility for future plot lines that I don't think they ever get into, which is the black market of irradiated infant changelings, where if you eat them, you get superpowers.
It's good to know, though, if you see a changeling that is blue and green, it is not one that you want to buy. It's like those are good just it's a surefire way to not get a good changeling. If they're not that healthy maple syrup golden brown, they're no good. What'd you think of the special effects of the changeling in this?
I thought it was pretty good. Yeah, they definitely used 14 different kinds of gelatin in this episode.
Yep.
I was expecting there to be some sort of what's the word? Slapstick involving him bringing it in a mug to the bar. I thought for sure Worf
there was the joke with Worf.
That shit. Yeah, I thought he was like Odo was going to do that thing where Odo gets up to go get something, and then Worf is like, "Ooh, free drink."
I like the bit of Worf asking why Odo's talking to his drink, and he says it's a changeling, and then Worf looks suspiciously at his drink and walks away. Yeah.
So, how would you prefer he gets his powers back if it wasn't this?
I don't know. I don't know how they do it. The only other way would be if the founders gave them back to him for some reason.
What if instead of him just absorbing the powers or whatever, it's again they technobabble away something about I don't know, some sort of DNA matrix transference thing. So it like unplugged the plug that they put in him. I don't know.
Well, how's this? Say, is this too much of a similar thing? And I'm just making a big deal of it. What if the baby changeling before it died learned how to link? Because it is a founder, right? It does have this ability to get to the Great Link. What if it makes the conscious decision, it becomes a humanoid for a brief period, and it links with Odo and unlocks his powers again because it is a founder that would be able to do that to him? Do you know what I mean? Does that work?
I'm down with that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even know if you need to have it become a
human.
A human. I think if you get, so if you gave more time to that death scene, right? And so he's holding it in his hands and he's, crying and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. Then the dying act of the baby is that it links with him. Yeah. And like you're saying, and then, unplugs the stopper there. Or
and they get their true changeling connection at that point. That scene is, the show has told us that is the most important thing to the changelings, the Great Link. So
especially since they make such a point of saying like, oh, you're talking to it, he can hear you. Right. Or it can hear you, it can understand you, it just can't talk back to you. So I think it would have been really nice to have that. And I guess it's kind of what they ended up going for with absorbing it and giving him his powers back the way they did. But I think it would have been even more emotionally impactful if it actually did link with him. Like you're saying. Yeah, I think that would have been fantastic.
Yeah, I think there's a subtle difference there. It is kind of the same thing as you're saying, but I think that it's more in line with how this race has been treated, and it feels like it's more of a final goodbye to each other that they could say. Like they communicate with each other in a way that doesn't seem to happen here.
And it's also it's also the baby sort of giving him.
Actively giving a gift, it feels like.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't want to say reward, but yeah, giving him a gift for treating him so kindly and, taking care of him, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I'd agree. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about this one, or should we just wrap it up?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
All right, so we're going to take a break, play an audio clip. Me and Clay are going to come back, read some patron thoughts, and then give our final thoughts about The Begotten.
I thought the O'Briens were having a party.
Shakar and I stopped by. I didn't feel much like celebrating.
Oh?
I got into this because the O'Briens needed my help. I never wanted a baby. But now, I just wish I could hold him in my arms and never let him go.
I think I know how you feel, Doris.
Want to take a walk?
All right, everybody. So if you support the show on patreon.com/the Pensky File, you get to leave your thoughts about upcoming episodes. We read them and react to them on the podcast. Holly McLaughlin says, The Begotten. Odo's making peace with the closest thing he's ever had to a father figure is another part of the humanizing journey, and it's great to see. Any actor's portrayal of women in labor either works really well or not at all, and I think this one works, though I have the feeling Clay and Wes are going to spend the whole episode arguing the opposite. Haha. Kira and Odo's post-loss bonding is relatable and touching. I will argue to the death that the way they treat labor in this episode is not particularly respectful. It is horrible. It is. If you have not gone through it, it's like a medical emergency giving birth. Like women had died through this whole process. It's very, very strange.
It's not like when anytime you like ask your mom about it and she's like, oh, it was fine. It was just a couple hours of
they block it out,
slight discomfort. Yeah,
no, women block it out. It must be a natural reaction that they block out how miserable they are through the entire experience.
I have heard that is actually something that happens.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It makes sense. There's so much blood.
Because otherwise you would never do it again.
Exactly. No, it's true. The Begotten.
That's why it always blows my mind when people have babies like within a year of each other or like even a couple years. I guess you guys did.
Most impressive to me is twins first and then they have another baby. That's a shocking thing people do.
Yes.
Yeah.
My grandmother had a girl, then twin boys, then 4 more kids. And if I remember correctly, they didn't even know they were having twins until it happened.
Yeah. Science. Christian Pouch says, The Begotten, I'll watch James Sloyan, Dr. Mora, act in just about anything. I think Odo is periodically a bit over the top in his anger towards him, but otherwise the interaction is pretty good. Odo being so happy, and then so devastated, and then so happy again was pretty well done, even if his landing looked a little bit odd. I know that some people will say, well, that was pointless. He didn't stay human long at all, but I disagree. Just because it wasn't permanent or season long doesn't mean that's a rather big accomplishment for the show. Consider the era of TV and what other Trek shows have done. This isn't Game of Thrones. Appreciate what they did do, not what they could have done 10 years later. I think that's fair. Let's see, another comment about The Begotten. Will Yates, Rene Auberjonois has trouble making a bad episode. I do like that the experience brought Kira and Odo closer together. That said, I feel the whole point was to make him a changeling again. I think they should have had the baby a bit more emotive so that I cared more when the puddle was dying. The B-plot was just tough to watch. After all these months, the sex ghost has a problem. It's true. They tried to get Shakar there and he never showed up. Neil Brennan, The Begotten. How did they manage to make a jug of Jell-O so moving? Well played, everyone. Although the squabbling men at the childbirth feels like a very cliche trope. What's that?
You got to tap the Jell-O and then it jiggles. That's how you get it moving.
Jello. Last comment, Matthew Ross, The Begotten. A sweet story of father-son type. It was fascinating watching Auberjonois talk to a jar and a blob, or whatever the prop was. Although it was clearly a gel of some type, you felt that there was genuine emotion being conveyed. The story of the relationship and healing between Odo and Dr. Mora was also heartfelt. It was a parental story that strikes a nerve with we parent types, but even when I saw it originally when it first broadcast, to me, it hit all the emotional and sci-fi high points. The comedy of the birth of O'Brien's child and the loss of Odo's made for a silly break in contrast with the sad story, with Kira and Odo sharing their new lives and recognizing their losses and moving on. Odo getting back his changeling abilities, although not unexpected, was at least an ending with a bird soaring in hope. A pleasant DS9 story. It's true. The symbolism's a little bit on the nose, but they do mention the Tarkalian hawk that Odo tells the baby he's going to show him how to turn into. So it's a little bit of a foreshadowing thing, even if the symbolism of soaring is a little bit on the nose.
It wouldn't have been as good. It wouldn't have been as triumphant of an ending or hopeful of an ending if he just turned into a rock.
That's right. A sphere, one of the most basic shapes in all of nature. I did like all the glass geometric shapes that they had, all these containers that you can put the baby into.
I have a theory that Odo is really into conspiracy theories because of the way that he was drooling over that pyramid as being one of the most mysterious shapes in nature.
I only think about those little pyramid things, those horrible monkey experiments where they put baby monkeys at the bottom of, they called them like the pyramid of despair or something like that, to torture them to see what, like how isolation impacts baby monkeys.
I have never heard of that.
Yeah, you can look it up. I think they call it, or the pit of despair. They call it something like that.
I don't think I need to.
That was the good era of the 1970s when you could just torture people or torture animals and call it science. Let's see. I think that's it. That's all the comments. Thank you very much, guys, for leaving your comments. Clay, what are you going to give The Begotten?
I'm going to give it a 4.
Yeah. I'm going to give it a 4 as well. Could have been a 5 to me. Yeah. But even though I think its problems are more interesting than outright bad to it, I think that the issues that it brings up about the previous storylines being a little bit weak and the ending, I think, is probably a big misstep. I do think it's a really good episode. It's really emotionally satisfying, and I like the character work, and I like the work that Auberjonois does in this and everything like that. But it does have some weird problems to it, even though I think it's a very good episode.
Yeah, I think if they had, honestly, if they had just given him more of a scene at the end with the dying changeling, I think it probably would have been a 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if they had changed it, if they had done, not to say if they had done what we said to do, but if they had, had that more emotional connection there at the end with a longer scene of him dealing, because I was expecting like weeping, sobbing, crying Odo at the end there, and they did not do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if that scene had been stronger, it would have been a 5.
Yeah, the crying would be interesting because he would only be able to cry as a solid. Once he's a changeling again, he doesn't really cry. You know what I mean? Like his tears are just him. If he makes himself cry, he has to
and if you hit the same rib twice, it makes the same noise on the xylophone.
I want to taste the real salt of those solid tears that are coming out of Odo's eyes.
So does that mean theoretically that like a crying changeling is like the most disgusting thing you could possibly think of because he's just dripping pieces of himself onto the floor?
I'd argue that they would just be they are crocodile tears, basically. Like they don't really, they're not really crying. They're trying to kind of pretending that they're crying, even if they feel sad. They're still just pretending.
Yeah, it'd be like in The Simpsons when the future episode when Lisa gets engaged to the British guy.
Yeah,
and the robot starts crying and his whole head melts.
That's it. We're done. Guys, check out the social media links, Facebook, Twitter, Discord. That's where you want to go if you want to talk about the show. You can support the show on patreon.com/the Pensky File. A couple of $2 a month, you get extra stuff. There's a PayPal link if you'd rather do that. If you disagree with Patreon's politics or something, you can go to PayPal. If you want to buy t-shirts, we have a Teespring link. You can buy cups and t-shirts, all that good stuff listed down below. And last but not least, if you're on somewhere like Reddit or Twitter and you hear a conversation about what Star Trek podcast is out there, I'd be much obliged if you'd mention our little show. It does seem to be the most natural way to drive traffic to this show. We're no Greatest Generation, which is always the top marks of a Star Trek podcast, but we try our best. And Clay, do you have anything you want to say?
I was going to say you could do that thing where like two of you go to a Reddit thread and just like casually start talking about it yourselves. You know, like that sly way of viral marketing in like the 50s where two people would walk into a room or a bar and talk about how great a certain style of vodka was. And then hopefully the people around you would start ordering that style of vodka.
Reddit makes it difficult because you have to create your account. You have to live for a couple months posting on every other comment, like so that people don't just think you created the account just to sort of inflate your own comment posts and everything like that. It's a whole to do. I've tried. Lord knows I've tried.
That's so much work.
It is, yeah. Not worth it.
I don't really use Reddit. I did briefly when we were doing the Prisoner show. I was frequenting the Prisoner Reddit
subreddit
board.
Yep. But
it was like 15 people. So.
it's a very small Reddit. Yep, it is. I've gotten more into Reddit recently. I took a while off of it, but I've gotten. It's really how much you customize it is what you get out of it. But I've been enjoying it for what it is now. And occasionally people do mention us on the Star Trek subreddit, which is much appreciated. That's why I keep mentioning it here. I think it is the best way to bring about people to listen to the show. And I think that's it. We're done with the Begotten. We are going to be back with For the Uniform, which is a continuation of the For the Cause storyline. So you can look forward to that.
We've got a new show, too.
Oh, that's right. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, we've got a new show. We're dipping our toe into the true crime world, sort of, with the Radiostar Murders, which is going to be us looking at the who, why, and how of when video killed the radio star. We're talking about music videos.
Talking about music and music videos, yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to be fun. We're kind of looking at music videos as little short films and whether or not they were successful and whether or not they were ridiculous or great.
And they do go through the whole gamut. There's a whole lot of different takes on all those things. Yeah, but it's been fun.
I've been interested to see how there's sort of a pattern emerging. Like there are certain types, and it seems like there's only a few certain types of videos that everybody makes, depending on what kind of thing you're looking for. So it's been interesting seeing how they classify themselves.
Yep. So check that out. It's the Radiostar Murders. It's on the YouTube channel. It's got its own podcast feed. You can check that out. There's a Spotify link to all the songs that we've done so far, blah, blah, blah.
It's a weird list.
The algorithm will not know what you're talking about if you listen to that music. Spotify's algorithmic recommendations will be sort of off the wall for you. It destroyed my Spotify account just by making that playlist. I no longer can listen to anything that I like. That's it. Guys, thank you very much for listening. We will see you next time.